All right, working on one of these. It's a 2007 Saturn Vue, and if you're lucky and you have a Saturn, then you get one of these Honda engines, 3.5 V6 Honda engine. And what we're doing today, we're going to tear this thing down and put a timing belt and water pump in it. So the first thing I'll do is remove this air box. Before I get into this, if you've never done timing belts or are not a real competent mechanic, then I mean, timing belts aren't super complicated to do, but if you make a mistake, you can ruin your engine or bend valves, and then you're looking at taking the head off and all that stuff. So I don't know. I'm always real leery about newer techs or newer people. I know you have to do it, get the experience, but if you're not real confident in your abilities, this isn't something I would do. As just like a mild do-it-yourself or something. Just because the job itself is not super hard. I mean, it's probably a B-level tech type job. But if you make a mistake with this belt or almost any belt, and I know these engines here are definitely interference engines. So if you make a mistake with it, you're going to be bending valves. The piston's going to hit the valve. It's going to be bent, and then you're going to have to pull the head off and have the valves replaced, etc. So I'm not trying to discourage anyone from doing it, but if you're not, if you kind of do oil changes and little stuff here and there, and you don't work on cars regularly, then it's not something I would recommend you do. I'm not saying you can't do it, but just if you make a mistake, just know that you might be into it for several $1,000s if that mistake happens. So that's just my little disclaimer. Like I said, these probably a B-level tech type job. So anyway, we'll just I just want to make that little disclaimer, and then we're going to start tearing it down. I'm going to get rid of this air intake and box and get it out of the way, and we'll pick up from there. All right, you can see now the air box out of the way, we got a lot of room to work. I'm going to go ahead and remove this computer out of the way, just so you can have good access to the backside camshaft, and then I'll probably put it up in the air, take the wheel off, and hit that serpentine belt. But for now, I'll take out these couple bolts to hold this ECM in and get that thing out of the way. One thing I'll point out when taking that ECM off, you have 3 nuts and then, typical wire loom connectors and stuff. But go ahead and disconnect your battery before you take off your ECM. It's just good insurance. No reason to have. Just do it. Makes it protects yourself. So now we're going to jack it up and take the wheel off and whatever plastic piece of crap they hung from the frame. We'll take that off. And then I'll take the serpentine belt off. And then we'll probably hit this motor mount. So yeah, that'll be the next step. Jack it up, take the wheel off, see what kind of plastic crap they got hanging in your way. Take that out and soldier on. All right, so once you get the wheel off, you got this little plastic guard on these Saturn Vues. 5 or 6 of those push clips. Kind of small, not a lot of room. Most of the time these cars you can open it up really good under here. Anyway, we'll go after that bolt, the crank bolt, and first we're going to take the serpentine belt off, get that out of the way, and then we'll hit that crank bolt. So next we'll take the serpentine belt off, which is just a tensioner. Just put your your wrench on it and turn it, take the belt off, and then we'll pick back up with this crank bolt. Alright, so I made a video, I guess it was last week, or you can look back from some of the previous videos. Talked about this crank bolt on these Honda engines. It's a 19 millimeter, and most of the time, not all the time, most of the time, those things do not want to come off. And you can buy a special tool that goes in here and it holds it while you try to crank it off with a big breaker bar, because 9 times out of 10 impact will not get it off. And I made a video showing this tool here, which is the Milwaukee M18 Gen 2, 1,400 foot-pounds of breakaway torque. We're going to try it again, like we did with that last video, and see if it'll break it off without any help. And then if it doesn't, I'll show again a really easy way around all this. Alright, so here it is, 19 mil. Put it in reverse, see if it comes loose. No dice. So like in the last video, I'll show you it again. Get one of these Lyle 77080 sockets. It's made just for these Honda balancer crank bolts, and I'll take it out of the package. You see here, it's got a thick wall on it, and that's so that hammering action doesn't dissipate like it does with a thin-walled socket. So you'll see now the Milwaukee will probably zip this right off with this socket on there. And I think those sockets, don't quote me on it, I think they're about 30 or 40 bucks. But if you do these jobs enough, or you're in the Hondas. Wow. Let me check my setting. Okay, my gun's not on. Alright, let's try it again on this setting. There you go. I had it on a... So that may not have been a fair test. I didn't realize my gun was on a lower setting. So here it is. And again, you know, you don't... I doubt it would have took it off even on the higher setting. So it wasn't really a fair test. But I do have a video where I showed on the high setting with the battery fully charged and it doesn't budge it. So anyway... if you're so inclined, you don't want to spend all day messing with this, just get yourself one of these Lyle, what is it, 77080 sockets. And anyway, so now you can just kind of work this off. You don't need a special tool to take this pulley off. It's just pressed, not pressed on, but just key weight in. So just use both hands and rock it back and forth and it'll come off. And anyway, I'm going to do that now. Alright, so I got that pulley off. One thing I will mention, these Saturns, it's really, the Vue anyway, it's really nice. I just did an Accord last week, and the Accords, there's hardly any room. There's not much room in here. Man, there's all kinds of room on these Saturns. It's really nice. It's, you know, it's a lot easier than the Accord anyway, as far as room. So, at this point, the pulley's off. All you're down to at this point is this motor mount and your covers. So what you want to do is put a block of wood under the oil pan, hold your engine, put a jack under there, hold the engine, and we'll pull this motor mount off. There's this piece and there's a piece that goes into the block, and we'll pull that off, and then all we have is the covers left, and we'll be down to the nitty-gritty on this thing. So that's where we're at. We'll get this motor mount off first. Alright, so you got two 15s and two 18s. So, gotta zip those off. I can find my impact real quick. Hopefully the camera doesn't fall off here. And again, I have this engine supported with a block and a jack underneath on the oil pan. You definitely don't want to forget that step. You can see the Milwaukee has no trouble taking bolts off. That's why it's so amazing that that crank bolt is so hard for it to get off. Like, it just doesn't do it. So you got that off, and now we'll take this piece off. And I'm pretty sure it's a little bit different than the Accords. I'm pretty sure it has to come off, so we'll run this piece off next. Alright, so I was wrong on that. I forgot about that. This is actually behind the timing covers. So the timing covers come off, then this comes off, and then before, when you put it back together, don't forget to put this on first before the timing covers. So what we have here, we just have a bunch of 10 mils around the perimeter of the timing cover. I'm not going to show that. Just run those off, and we'll pick it back up with the covers off. But there's not a whole ton of bolts. Well, actually, Honda does like to use. There's even some down in here. So anyway, you have probably about 15 bolts or so to get out, 10 mil. Just all around the perimeter, top covers and the bottom cover, and then we'll go for this, and then we'll be down to where we need to be. I'm still waiting for my parts to be delivered, so hopefully they get here before too long. All right, so this is what you're taking off. This is the side closest to the radiator. You can see you got the bolts around the perimeter there, and then there's one inside this recessed part. Same with this side. This is the side towards the firewall. Same deal. You have a little wiring loom, wiring harness that goes through here. Just pull that back. And then you have the big cover here, which has various bolts going around the perimeter of it. And there's two kind of on the inside. There's one here and one there. And it just pulls straight out. So then you're down to this. And what we'll do next is go ahead and pull this motor mount out. It has to come out if you're going to change the water pump anyway. So, I mean, you couldn't put the belt on. It's in the way. So, there's 3 bolts. And then a 10 mil for this wiring harness holder. And then this thing will pop right out. It should pop right out. Now, on the Honda, the cores and stuff, these are really, sometimes you can't get them out. You got to leave them in there or whatever. But on these, with this much room, we should pop it right out. So we'll get to that next. All right, once you get down to this, you got this motor mount off. Now you got one of your most important steps, and that's to get this engine on top dead center. You want your crankshaft and your 2 cams to be on top dead center. I'll show you how this is done on the Hondas. But you do not want to take this belt off until you have everything lined up, because like I said, it's an interference engine. If you get it out of time, you're going to be in for a big headache. So this is the time. This is probably one of the most important steps to the job is, well, that and putting it back on right. But always when you do a timing belt, make sure all your marks are lined up, the top dead center, before you take the belt off. You can see here's the water pump. And anyway, this, I don't know, this car's got a little over 100,000 on it. They say every 105 change this. So that's what we're doing today. Anyway, I'm going to find the marks. I mean, I know where the marks are at, but I'm going to find the marks on the cams and the crank and mark them real quick. Just kind of highlight them, hopefully, so I can see them easier, so you can see them easier. And then I'll turn it to turn the engine clockwise until everything lines up. But I'll kind of go over that. I'm going to first find the marks I'm looking for and try to mark them with chalk or something so that we can see it easier. Alright, so I got it marked and lined up. On the bottom here, there's an arrow. I don't know if I can get in there. There's an arrow on the engine cover, or on the engine itself. I don't know if you can see that. There's a arrow on the bottom pulley. I got some chalk on it. And those two are lined up. If those are lined up and your camshafts are not lined up, then you're 180 degrees out. And you got to turn it twice or once to get it, well, no, twice to get it back to the top. And on the top, this one over here on this side by the radiator has number 1 on it and then a mark. And that goes to this mark back here on the valve cover, or the engine cover. And on this one, it just has a mark. a long notch on the pulley, and that lines up with this notch right here. So if that one's, it's about 6 o'clock on the bottom one, so if that one's lined up right, then these all should be lined up. And if they're down here, that means you're 180 out. You got to go one more turn on the bottom. So anyway, that's you want to make sure these are all lined up perfectly before you take anything off. So now they're all lined up. We can take that tensioner off and take this belt off, and then we'll pull the water pump off. And I'm still waiting for parts, so lucky for you guys, you don't have to sit here and wait for the parts with me. It's on video. So anyway, I'm gonna pull this belt off, tensioner off, pull the belt off. We'll pull this water pump off. Hopefully by then the parts are here. All right, here's the water pump. It's got like 5 10mm bolts to hold it in. And then of course that one motor mount goes through here, and then there's a pulley that goes through here. But to get it, once you got everything off, to get this off, I think it's 5 10mm bolts, and that comes off. So anyway, we're down to get all that done. It should look like this. And once the water pump gets here, we'll put that on first, and then we'll put this belt on and get this thing going again. All right, whenever you do a timing belt, just order the kit and get all new pulleys and tensioners whenever possible. I know sometimes it's not always possible. Like, you know, like a Mazda Miata, it's hard to get the parts for those on some of them and stuff. But on these Hondas, you can get the new pulleys, and you know, it's got a new tensioner. So go ahead and spend the extra money and get all that. So again, you know, this is an interference engine, so you don't want something failing down the road and causing, you know, catastrophic engine failure. So anyway, that's where we're at on this. I went ahead and put the new water pump on already, and then I'll put in the idler pulley, and we'll put in the adjuster and the tensioner, and then we'll put the belt on. So that'll be the next thing we'll work on, is just getting the components back on the front of the engine here. One thing I'll point out, on these kits I've noticed that on the tensioner pulley, they don't come with these sleeves. That you know, it basically comes like this. There's no, the brace is in there, but the sleeve is not in there. So make sure you take that out and put it in the new one, because you don't, you know, this won't be tight. You could actually probably screw it in there and bolt it in, but it would be it wouldn't be tight around the bolt. So just make sure you take that out and put it in. I've noticed these kits don't come with this sleeve here. So don't forget to put that. If the kit doesn't come with it, don't forget to take it off the old one and put it on the new one. Otherwise, you will get in trouble for sure. The other thing I'll point out is the new tensioner comes with this pin installed. Don't remove that until you get the belt on and it's all set up right. That's what, after you get it all set up, you'll pull that pin, and that'll put the proper tension on it. But make sure not to remove that until your belt's on and all ready to go. All right, so once you get your new tensioner pulley installed, and your new, your idler pulley, your tensioner pulley, and your tensioner, everything's installed, I like to go ahead and blow it out real good. Just take an air hose and blow it out real good, because you don't want any kind of debris getting in that new belt. So I'm going to go ahead and blow this out real good, and then we'll start getting this belt on and getting this thing back together. Alright, so after you get the belt on, what you want to do on this belt is start at the crankshaft and come around this pulley here and go up to the front camshaft towards the radiator. Go under the water pump, and then sometimes you may have to turn this one slightly towards the front for it to line up. Just take a 17mm opening and just barely turn it. Lock the teeth in around that, and then come back around the tensioner, and then it goes back down to the crank, obviously. At this point, what you want to do is turn the engine over real slowly. Double check your marks. You know, my marks are still lined up. And sometimes when you put a belt on, you know, and this belt's pretty tight, even with the tensioner not released yet. So sometimes when you put a belt on, it'll move your, marks a tooth or so. So always double check that. Now what you want to do is rotate the engine at least twice, probably 4 times over by hand, and make sure that they all line back up. If they all line back up at that point, then pull your pin on your tensioner, and you're ready to rock and roll. And you want to turn it over by hand clockwise. So I'm going to do that real quick and make sure they all line back up. Pull the pin on the tensioner, and then we'll start putting this bad boy back together. All right, so I turned the engine over by hand about four times. I pulled this pin out for the tensioner. So now it should be nice and tight all the way around. Just double check it. Sorry. Just double check, make sure it's nice and tight everywhere, which it is. And so this thing is ready to get that motor mount back in. They'll put those covers on. So technically this should be, everything is good. Normally I'm really particular about this, so I'll probably turn it over a couple more times, at least twice more, to bring it back up tight dead center, just to make sure after I pull that pin. And then we'll start on those motor mounts. But I'm real particular about this. I don't want any issues with this kind of thing. This is why I said always take your time and do a good job. Be careful on these timing belts. So I'm gonna turn it over 2 more times by hand. Make sure they all line back up, which I'm assuming they will, and then we'll put the mount back on. All right, so I turned it over 2 more times, or rotated the engine twice, and they all lined it back up perfect. So I went ahead and put this motor mount on. One thing I will point out though, if you turn it over and say you're a tooth off on one of the camshafts or something like that, and you have to pull the belt off and adjust it, if you do that, you're going to have to, and you pulled the pin already, you're going to have to put this gently in a vise or somewhere, or unless you have some other way to clamp it. Most people just put them in a vise real gently. And you got this little hole here and this little hole here, those 2 holes. So what you would do is you'd put it in a vise and you would compress this until that hole lines up with this hole, and then put the pin back in there. That's only if you pull the pin without you rotate it over and something's wrong. If it's a tooth off, fix it, because it may not hit the valves at one tooth, but it won't run right. So, and it could hit the valves too. I'm not sure on these engines, but you don't want to take a chance. Regardless, it's not going to run right. So, again, if you have to, or if you're going to reuse this for some reason, I wouldn't. But if you are going to reuse this for some reason, say you put a belt on 20,000 miles ago and the water pump goes out and you got to redo it, then that's how you would get this to reset, as you would compress this down. And if you lost a pin, you can put anything in there, an Allen wrench or whatever will work. Just something that goes all the way through to hold that pin down. So anyway, that's just a little note on that. So got the mount on, so the next thing we'll do, we'll put the covers back on, and then go from there. But we're starting to get to the home stretch here on this. So yeah, anyway, make sure you put this on first, because that has to go behind the timing covers, and then put the timing covers on, and we'll go from there. All right, I got the covers on. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to put this belt guide back on the crankshaft. If you have this, don't forget to put it back on. I don't know if all of them have it. I mean, all the ones I've done usually have it, but not all cars do. So just, if you took this off to line up your timing marks, make sure to put it back on. And then we'll put the pulley back on, and the serpentine belt, and then we'll work on the motor mount up top. So that's all I'm doing here. I'm just going to put this in, put this plate back on, or guide, and put the lower pulley on, crank pulley and crank bolt back in, and then we'll put the belt on and move on. All right, so you can see I got a serpentine belt on. I like to put that on before I put the motor mount on, because it's just easier to get to. Not a big deal either way, but you know, you got a lot more access with the motor mount out of the way. It's already out of the way anyway, so might as well put it on. So when the last test we'll do is put this motor mount back in, and the airbox, we're ready to rock and roll. So get the motor mount in next, and start on the airbox. Alright, so the motor mount's in. Obviously I had to lower the engine. I jacked the engine up a little bit to get the mount out. So you want to lower back up to those holes. These two holes line up. And then you can go ahead and remove your block and your jack from underneath it after you get it bolted in here. Put your ECM back in, hook up the connectors, and then work on your airbox. Alright, once you get the airbox back in, you should be ready to move down here. Put that plastic shield back on and wheel, and then hook your battery back up if you took it off, which I hope you did. And should be able to fire it up and start putting some coolant in it. So we'll do that and then make sure she fires. Alright, so got it all done. Starting to run it. We're kind of keeping an eye on the coolant right now. It's got a little bit of a belt line down there, and I ended up taking the serpentine belt back off and starting the engine without it on, and it went away. So it either has a tensioner or an alternator wind down there, and it kind of goes up as the engine revs up. So I don't think, if it's a tensioner, it's not, it felt pretty good when I rolled it. I guess it could be an alternator wind, but it's one of those two, because it's the only two things that really drive, well, the AC compressor, but I doubt it's that. So anyway, car's got 106,000 on it, and you're supposed to change the timing belt 105. So we did that, changed the water pump, pulleys, got it all back together. And you know, your only step after that would be to fill your coolant back up and test drive it. So that's pretty much it for a timing belt on a 07 Saturn Vue with 3.5 in it. This is the same engine that Honda used. It's Honda engine, so it's the same for the Odysseys and the Ridgeline or whatever the little truck is. So this video would pretty much pertain to those two. Anyway, if you like this video or learn anything from it, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it. We can reach more people that way. And we'll take this thing out for a test drive and then get this hoopty back on the road.